Take a look at these illustrations. Don't you notice something similar in all of them? In each one, they tell a story. Now when I show you these two illustrations, would you say the fully rendered illustration on the left tells a better story than the simple sketch on the right? Probably not, which is understandable since conveying a story through an illustration can be difficult since there's no panels or frames. So in this video, I'll be going through how I tell a story through a single illustration. But before we put pen on paper, we gotta do some preparing. So for the next step, we'll be doing some planning. Planning is important because if we just wing it, then the results will be, well, not as anticipated. We're gonna want to plan out what the message of the illustration will be, as well as which character we'll be drawing. If these art pieces don't make it absurdly obvious already, I'm a pretty big fan of the gacha game Zenless Zone Zero. And no, I'm not sponsored, I just really like the combat, and nothing else. So for this illustration, I wanted to give the main subject an ominous aura. As for the character, I'll be choosing to draw Sunbringer. No, not that Sunbringer. This one. Not that version either. This is the one I'm talking about. So for the reference I want to use, I'll be using her character sheet as a guide for the design, as well as the comic panels in-game. Now that we have everything mapped out for our illustration, all that's left to do is to make it. And to start it off, I'll be doing some thumbnailing. So here, I'm just brainstorming and doing a couple of thumbnail sketches to see which one I'd prefer to do. For this first one, I wanted to do a menacing walk-up, and I was trying to replicate this reference that I found on Pinterest. My anatomy wasn't the best, and I didn't really like it since it felt kinda flat, and looking back on it, I should have used perspective grids to improve it. But that's all in the past, so let's move on to the next thumbnail sketch. For the second thumbnail sketch, I felt a bit more confident on how the sketch was coming out, and it looked a lot cleaner than the first thumbnail, especially since I have an easier time drawing characters from a top-down bird's eye view. I chose to do a top view perspective, showcasing her mutated spear arm, since it would be cool to have her arm be a big focal point. Now for this last one, I kinda got lost in the sauce, because after mapping out my sketch, I started adding details and just expanded on my whole idea. This time I actually used perspective grids to help with the layout of the illustration. And I used this image I found on Pinterest to relay the message that this evil version of her was overpowering and cornering the original one through a reflection. Kinda like ZZZ doppelgangers in certain missions. After mapping out the pose for the sketch, I started drawing the clothes, and I kinda glossed over it since I'd improve it later on. And here it is! This is the thumbnail sketch. I'm pretty happy with how it is, and I feel like I got the vibe right with the poses. So now that I finished the thumbnailing, and oh no. I made a mistake and merged all the layers together, so now this perspective grid and the frame is all part of the line art. But I guess that leads us to our next step of refining. I usually don't refine my line work, as you can see here. I just like to skip the line work and use my sketches as the line art. But in this case, since I merged all the layers together, I'm refining the lines on a new layer here. After finishing the line work for the evil Sunbringer, I was about to start lining the other Sunbringer, but it felt like something was missing, and I didn't feel satisfied with it. I felt that the face wasn't exactly drawn well, so I went over it again, but I kept messing up the placements, the proportions, so I just called it a day and stopped drawing, because you gotta remember, it's important to take breaks. Or in my case, play Palworld for 7 hours straight. When I returned to draw again, and still struggled on the face, I had the bright idea of tracing. Not tracing the reference or anything. I mean tracing from my sketch. I already had a good line work going on, so why not use the face and hair from the sketch and put that on my refined line art? So that's exactly what I did here. Now that I was actually done with that, it's time to move on and do the line work for the other Sunbringer. But again, I still wasn't quite satisfied with it. What I originally wanted to do was convey the message of the evil version cornering the original. But I felt kinda unsure about that after the line art, so I thought I'd change it to be a part of the story where the main character is investigating papers on the floor while the evil Sunbringer sneaks up behind her. Remember, I may have made the thumbnail and everything else, but it's not like it's set in stone, so don't be afraid to change things up. After all, it's your art process and your art. Here you could see that I skipped drawing her hands by making her closer to the foreground because this isn't the video for that and I can do whatever I want since it's my art piece. Now that I finished up the line work for both characters, it's time to turn both of them into grayscale in order to set it up for coloring. The coloring process is very simple. I just clip all the color layers to the grayscale layer so I don't have to worry about any marks being made outside the lines. I then apply the base colors of the characters. Now that I have the base colors placed for the characters, it was time to paint the background. I mainly draw characters, of course, but I also think backgrounds can play a major role in storytelling or in setting the tone for an illustration. Make sure to keep in mind where you want your light source to be coming from when drawing the background, because it'll be useful in the next step. I painted enough to where you can tell that they're in an office, and I didn't go too crazy with the background because majority of it would be covered by the characters anyway, so I wouldn't want all that hard work to be wasted. Now that this step has been finished, we can finally move on to my favorite part, which is lighting. Just like backgrounds, lighting can play a huge role in determining the theme for an illustration. If you look at these drawings, they both look the same, but when I add different shadows to them, you could see the difference in their vibes immediately. Both changed a lot, even though the only thing I changed is the lighting. You can see that this one feels more serious, while this other one feels more spooky. Now I didn't mention it earlier, but before painting the background, I selected the grayscale of both Sunbringer and Belle, so it would create a selection over the characters only. And I added a multiply layer so they would appear darker as if they were in shadow. Before adding light, we need to determine where the light is coming from, but luckily we already did that. And in my case, the light source will be the ceiling lights just above Sunbringer. And now that we know where the light is coming from, we can erase the shadow in the areas where light will be hitting. was originally planning to use an overlay layer on the parts that light was hitting, but it seemed like too much, so I scrapped that idea. Now with that step over, all that's left to do is some cleaning. Technically, we're done with the art piece, but I want to go above and beyond and make some adjustments because these small fixes I'm about to make will definitely make it look different. So I continue fixing the hair by adding highlights to make the hair have a more glossy look to it, and I add some bounce light using an overlay layer to make Sunbringer a bit brighter. I ended up bringing Belle closer to the foreground and then blurring her, as well as the background, to make Sunbringer a bigger focus point. I added a glowing effect to Sunbringer's eye to make her feel more intimidating, and take a look how much has changed because of these simple adjustments. But just remember, clean up and render how you see fit. And with all those steps being completed, this is the final result. I'm really happy with how it came out, and I had a ton of fun drawing this. If you made it this far, I just want to thank you so much for watching. This is my first time making long-form content, as well as voicing over my videos, so apologies for the bad mic quality. This was a huge step out of my comfort zone since I usually post my artwork on short-form content like Instagram and TikTok. This took a while to make, so liking and subscribing would be a huge help to my channel, as well as my motivation to work. I hope to make more of these types of videos again, and I'll catch you in the next one. See ya!